without further ado, this is about masters athletes. As you can see, I'm a medical doctor and specializing in particularly sports and dance endocrinology. So I thought I'd start off with this, which is rather a lovely quote, I think, from Sir Steve Redgrave after he won his Olympic gold medal and was fully intending to retire after that. But then he returned to win another Olympic gold medal in the Sydney Olympics. So I know all of us, he's an exceptional athlete, and, you know, unfortunately we can't all be like him. Nevertheless, that just demonstrates that if you have the determination, then you can succeed as a masters athlete, whatever your goals. That's not to say, of course, that it's easy. And so if I just run through this slide, here are some of the challenges we get as we get older. So as we're going to look at in detail shortly, with aging comes decline in hormonal function. And as we're going to see, hormones are key to driving the positive adaptive adaptations to training. And so as the hormones decline with age, then you can see this is going to affect body composition in terms of reduced muscle mass, muscle strength, and also bone mass, whereas there's going to be a tendency to increase fat mass. All of those changes in itself can be a sort of a disincentive to remain active and exercise. And so then it could become a vicious circle. And also, as we get older, we have to accept that one is more likely to chronic illness and conditions like this might all be likely to affect you. So yes, there certainly are some challenges, but hopefully we're going to have a look at these and see what you can do to address these. And again, going back to the positive, this is a lovely graph to show for both men and women over different distances, 100 meters and 10,000 meters. You can see there that yes, speed does decline slightly with age, but really, it actually maintains. It's only a very, very gradual decline, and it's only until you really start to get higher up in the age groups in terms of in the 80s and 90s that maybe one does see a significant decrease in speed. So these are the sort of areas we're going to cover in the webinar. So we're going to have a look at this, starting off with the sort of crucial underlying challenge of decline in hormonal function with age. So here we can see growth hormone, and growth hormone isn't just important for young people growing. It's important throughout our life because it maintains a favorable body composition in terms of lean muscle and fat. But you can see with age, there is definitely a decline. So again, this is a crucial hormone driving adaptive changes. And so that is a challenge. It's going to be declining with age. If we now consider testosterone in men, yes, again, as you can see from in the blue, the testosterone, there is a slight decline with age. But estradiol, a type of the most active form of estrogen, shown in pink. Yes, I appreciate the men, your testosterone decreases, but please spare a thought for us women. Our estradiol really takes a nosedive at menopause. And all three of those hormones are crucial to health and therefore performance because they drive the adaptive changes from exercise training. So that's why it becomes a challenge. And these are the challenges, both in physical terms and mental terms, and in the short term, and also in the longer term. And I've already mentioned, really, to emphasize that point again, hormones are crucial for adaptive changes to exercise training. And this underlines, again, what I mean, that hormones drive all are important for regulating all these systems in the body. Bone, we've mentioned bone health, we'll look at it in a bit more detail, body composition, metabolic, all the properties of muscle, cardiovascular health, and very important mental aspects, both psychological and cognitive function. So, yes, it is certainly a challenge if these crucial hormones are declining with age. And these are some of the key ones in terms of body composition. I've already stressed that growth hormones and sex steroids, whether those are testosterone in men or estradiol in women, that means those lower levels, they're not going to drive the magnitude of the response to training in terms of cardiovascular system and also energy systems. Means that as we get older, we've got a reduced anaerobic capacity. Also body composition I've mentioned, in terms of there tends to be a decrease in lean body mass, the metabolically active tissues. And also it's not just the composition, the body in terms of lean and fat, but also actually the quality itself of those tissues. Without those hormones, they're going to affect the quality of the tissue. And so therefore, putting all that together, potentially one is at higher risk of injury as a masters athlete. Looking at bone health, if you please focus on the green line for the moment, you can see this graph shows age along the bottom and bone mineral density on the vertical axis. And you can see, looking at the green line, there's a rapid increase in bone mineral density during the adolescence until you attain peak bone mass around early 20s, mid 20s. And then it stays relatively stable, and then it declines, unfortunately, once again with age. Particularly in women reaching the menopause, you saw already the nosedive in estradiol in women, and that's reflected in bone health as well. Also, if athletes are in low energy availability, which we will discuss in more detail, but essentially not fueling sufficiently for the training load that they're trying to undertake, then this can also affect bone health. And so as bone mineral density tends to decline with age, then if already you're not at a very good starting point, then you can see once again that such an athlete is going to be at increased risk of fractures. So those are sort of the challenges, but how are we going to overcome these as a masters athlete? What's under your control? And this really is what is under your control. So the good news that is, to a certain extent, one can mitigate those decline in hormone levels through your behaviors as an athlete. And those three key behaviors are training load, recovery, and nutrition. And if you have a good integrated balance of all these three behaviors, then you can see you're in the optimal position to harness your hormones to drive those adaptive changes. However, and this is another way of looking at it, by the way, here are the three variables on your left. And you can see it is tricky. It's a balancing act, isn't it? You're trying to look for the optimal zone for each of those three athlete behaviors, which the incentive is that this will mean that your hormones will be in a better position to function, be responsive, and drive those adaptive processes, and of course keep you healthy. And as I said, this is a challenge. This is a complicated diagram, but if you look underneath that, sort of under the surface, what's going on inside. On the top are the things that external factors that you're probably more familiar with in terms of your training, your fueling, but underneath, this is what's going on underneath within your body, your hormones. And you can see that, of course, we're familiar. I'm sure you're all familiar as athletes, periodization of training, but you've got to now factor in the fact that also as you get older, you've got another timescale you've got to be dealing with. And it's crucial to try and synchronize all these factors as shown here in this diagram. So you've got to respect your internal biological clocks, biochronometers as they're called, as over the lifespan. So of course you wouldn't be training or expect to train as you would if you were 20 years of age. So you have to make those changes in your behaviors. And if you don't, then you're at risk of this thing called circadian misalignment. So there's a mismatch between what externally you're trying to do in terms of training load, nutrition, recovery, and actually what your body inside your internal biological clocks, especially in terms of the hormones. So there will be this misalignment. And we know from several studies that this can have adverse effects on health and therefore your athletic performance. So it is a balancing act, and you have to consider different timescales. So how are you going to exactly address this and take into account these different timescales? So for a masters athlete, it's recommended that you undertake a longer dynamic warm-up. So definitely not static stretching, which frankly we shouldn't really be doing anyway, but certainly you need a longer warm-up. And also the type of training. You're trying to give your body the maximum anabolic stimulus to try and get those key hormones, growth hormone, testosterone, to trigger those to respond. And so you can do this through including interval type training, so high intensity training, and polarization. So yes, there will be, it's the light and the shade. And I know my son, who's a cycling coach, always tells me off that tells me that I train like an age grouper, because I like to do the same thing all the time. But it's really important to have these different aspects. The body responds to change, not one constant stimulus. And also the other thing that we should be considering as we get older is incorporating more strength work for favorable body composition. So you're trying to mitigate the aging process, the tendency to lose muscle. And so it's very important, especially as we get older, to include more strength work in our training schedule. And also I've mentioned the type of training, and we'll come on to a particular study and I'll show you this, because we're trying to encourage the fast twitch muscle fibers to stay active, because as we get older, we can be lose our sprint, as it was. And so you've got to actually target the type of training to encourage this. And also very important, recovery. As you get older, you do need more recovery because you need more time for the body to put into place those adaptive changes and to recover so that you're ready for your next session. And I think you're all familiar with this type of diagram, that you do a training block and then you recover, and it's during the recovery actually that you improve your fitness. And also there are different types of training blocks for age group athletes. Block training is sometimes recommended as an approach to this. But certainly recovery is very, very important, especially as you get older. And I think it's worth reading out this quote, not mine, from Shakespeare actually, that the chief nourisher in life's great feast is sleep. And why is sleep so important? Because the two key stimuli for growth hormone release is sleep and exercise. So you can't just be doing one and not the other. You need both of those for a synergistic effect. And in order to ensure good sleep, there's this term sleep hygiene, which includes sort of a wind down period for when it's bedtime. I know I'm guilty of this. I definitely use my computer too late because that light is not very good. It prevents the formation of the sleep hormone melatonin. Rather, it's better to have a routine, a relaxing routine, which includes a bedtime milky type drink, because milk is great. It's got a particular type of protein called casein, which is very good for muscle repair. And also it's got this precursor called tryptophan to synthesize the sleep hormone melatonin. And of course, we all know you feel better and more mentally refreshed if you have a good night's sleep. So sleep really becomes a very important factor for masters athletes. And this is the study I mentioned earlier. This study, I think it's really worth looking at the details of this. Fascinating. So I mentioned that as we age, the type of skeletal muscle, the proportions tends to change. But this study, you can see here, they had 16 men, average age 72, and they were comparing them against 14 men, average age of 26. And at the start, as you might expect, there was obviously a difference. But when the 72-year-old men were given a 12-week supervised resistance sessions there, you can see with 1 max reps, as a result of that, just 12 weeks, at the end, they were as good as the 26-year-old, which is quite amazing, I think. And what was going on? These people had muscle biopsies, poor things, and they showed there was a benefit for the fast twitch, the sprint type 2 muscle fibers in terms of their size. Okay, so hypertrophy, getting bigger, and also for both types of muscles, both the fast twitch and the so-called slow twitch type 1, which is particularly important for endurance, there was increased capillary bed density. So, of course, you need to supply a good blood supply to the muscles to provide the nutrients and oxygen, etc., for them to function properly. So if you needed any persuading that strength conditioning, strength work is a good idea, I refer you to this study.